Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Daily Devotions with Pastor Peter. Today we're in Genesis chapter 5, and I promise you this will be an interesting chapter. You'll see eventually. Let's continue on and see what it says. This is the written account of the descendants of Abraham. When God created human beings, he made them to be like himself. He created them male and female and blessed them and called them human. When Adam was 130 years old, he became the father of a son who was just like him in his very image. He named his son Seth. After the birth of Seth, Adam lived another 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Adam lived to 930 years, and then he died. When Seth was 105 years old, he became the father of Enosh. After the birth of Enosh, Seth lived another 807 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh was 90 years old, he became the father of Kenan. After the birth of Kenan, Enosh lived another 815 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Enosh lived 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan was 70 years old, he became the father of Mahalalel. After the birth of Mahalalel, Kenan lived another 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Kenan lived 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel was 65 years old, he became the father of Jared. After the birth of Jared, Mahalalel lived another 830 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Mahalalel lived 895 years, and then he died. When Jared was 162 years old, he became the father of Enoch. After the birth of Enoch, Jared lived another 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Jared lived 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch was 65 years old, he became the father of Methuselah. After the birth of Methuselah, Enoch lived close fellowship with God for another 300 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Enoch lived 365 years while walking in close fellowship with God. Then one day he disappeared because God took him. When Methuselah was 187 years old, he became the father of Lamech. After the birth of Lamech, Methuselah lived another 782 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech was 182 years old, he became the father of a son. Lamech named his son Noah, for he said, "May he bring us a relief from our work and the painful labor of farming this ground that the Lord had cursed." After the birth of Noah, Lamech lived another 595 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This is a really interesting chapter. The reason why I say really interesting was because if you look and you do the math at Noah, he lived long enough to have secondhand accounts, or I think my chart, where's that chart? Give me 1 second. I have this chart, and this is, I know this is huge, you probably can't see it. This is what it is. I've got this really cool timeline. I was thinking about putting it on my roof. This is the timeline of the world based on all sorts of cultures and civilizations. I guess you could see that. Do I have it upside down? I don't think so. Anyways, as I look through this, it shows me... No, I didn't have it upside down. Yes, I did have it upside down. It shows me the genealogy and everything going on here too. So, when Noah was alive... Okay, so Adam lived to 930 years old. When Noah was alive, when Noah was alive, let's see, Enosh was alive still too, and this is through Seth. So here's the thing. So Adam, Seth, and then his son Enosh was alive when Noah was alive. So this was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations. So again, people lived a long time at that time. I know I'm looking. You guys are like, what are you looking at? What are you looking? So if you see this timeline here, this is Noah. Noah lived at the same time period all the way up to the second generation of the third generation of one who came out of the Garden of Eden. So the story of Genesis and everything that we see here, put that on the ground, the story of Genesis that we see here, and the fact that Noah had, third-hand account of what took place is amazing, because the stories of Genesis were still with him, because he had his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was third generation from Adam, so Adam, Seth, and then his son, third generation, was still around when Moses was there. And the reason why it's important for us to have genealogies is because genealogies allows us to see the connection, the reality that there were people who were connected from the past, and then it also allows us to trace back time, and then also allows us to trace back family lines as well too. And so there are a few questions that people usually ask me about this is, how reliable is the Bible? And I would say quite, because it was word of mouth that was passed on from people who were very close to the beginning source. So if Adam and Eve were there at the beginning and they went through all this, 3 generations down isn't too long. It's like me telling the story of my grandfather, which isn't too bad because I know him and I'm connected to him. And so that's kind of where Noah was. He was able to connect to generation 3 all the way back up because people lived for hundreds of years. But that also lets us see that the world is not, according to the Bible, the world is not that old in time. And why are people so perplexed about that when I say that? Is because we have carbon dating and then also all these other things that science has told us that our Earth is millions and millions of years old. The reason why, this could still be refuted is because nobody has been around for that long. And also, with the account of Noah, which we could get into later, allows for a lot of the things within geology to happen a lot faster. Usually, things that happen through time takes time in order for us to have the coal deposits that we have and all these other things. But if you look at the sediment layers and how things happen because of the flood, then it gives us a plausibility that this could have happened. And especially when cultures around the world have stories about the flood too, which we'll get into next. But what I wanted to get in here before we get into all that genealogy stuff was that genealogies are important. And the interesting about genealogies is not only do we have great names that we could pass on to our kids later on to have them be teased for the longest time. Imagine naming your kid Ham. He probably would be a goofy kind of guy. But I mean, it'd be hilarious. But then also it shows us that there was order, there was structure, where there's time, there was space. God allowed us to have this because it gives it credibility that people were there. This is not some fairy tale or mystical thing, which I'll talk about later when we talk about Noah's Ark. These were things that took place in history. This is a historic book that God has called us to keep from the time of Adam all the way down so that we could trace it backwards. And the Jewish people would trace their genealogy backwards. And for us too, it's important to know where we come from. I think that's the next point that I want to say. We have lived in this earth, or this country has been around for, 250 years or so. And that's not a very long time. But the fact that we may not know our history could be problematic because we could run into the same problems that we had at the beginning, or we fall prey to the weaknesses of our country that we've had before and the things that have taken place. That's why it's important for us to study history so that we can know where we come from in order for us to know where we're going to head. We know what our weaknesses are so that we can prevent it in the future. And with the Bible, too, this allows us to see from the past all the way till now. These names are written in history for our reference of legitimacy. These aren't just random names. So as we continue to read the Bible, I want us to hang on to that the fact that God has written these names in the Bible gives us a kind of understanding that, tradition and faith needs to be passed from generation to generation. Our inheritance, I guess you could say, our legacy needs to be passed on. And that's something that young people as well as old people need to think about too. What are we passing on to the next generation? Especially when it comes to our faith and an understanding of God. It's our responsibility, or else it would be forgotten. Go to the book of Judges. You'll see what happens in the book of Judges where, a generation passed by and none of them knew or even remembered what God did. And that's a sad situation. But it was written down so that we could remember that and learn from it. So, don't bore yourself with genealogies. Realize that it's really important that we have genealogies. I'm sure you would want to zoom or skip past through it pretty quick because it is kind of boring. But just remember, when you look at a genealogy, it is important that we do pass the baton on to the next generation. And then the next generation. And the next, to make it as part of our DNA on how we function rather than hanging on to things so tightly. That's it for today. Hopefully you found that interesting. I know I did some weird stuff with my map. If you do want to see this poster, ask me. I can reveal it to you in maybe another video. Alrighty, take care. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.